Hello, everyone. Happy Tuesday. Welcome to Home with Isha Sesay. So good to have you with us. A very busy day, very busy show coming up for you. We're going to start in North Africa, a region that we haven't paid a huge amount of attention to leading up to this moment, but that is where we start the show today with an update on the situation in that region, specifically in Algeria. We'll have a live report for you with a journalist there. We're also going to be taking a look at where we stand in this pandemic right now globally and what the absence of American leadership means for the world as a whole, and of course for poorer, less resourced countries. It is a world away from where we were when Ebola broke out in 2014, and we have a guest on the show who says that the world is suffering because of the absence of global cooperation, and he shares his ideas and his thoughts about how we get back to a place where we're all working together. Also, you've seen the memes probably, you've seen them dancing with coffins, you've seen the suits, you've seen the top hats. Ghana's pallbearers are going to be with us, the dancing pallbearers as they're known. We speak to them about their new mission, which isn't just about, dancing and bringing a little bit of showmanship to burials, but also a warning in this time of COVID of why people should take real care when it comes to following these guidelines. We have that and so much more. It's a jam-packed show. Let's get started. Okay, lots of fancy new graphics around here. I hope you like them. Make sure you write in and tell me what you think about it. We're going to start in Algeria, as I said, a country which has followed suit along with many other countries around the world in putting in place restrictions on movement, closure of most businesses, schools and universities have been shut. There's been a suspension of public transport. All of that has been put in place there in North Africa, and yet the numbers continue to climb. At last check, they had over 6,000 cases. But at the same time, there are critics, analysts who say that the Algerian government's response to this pandemic isn't just about curbing the spread of this virus, that it is also about crushing long-standing anti-government protests that have been going on in that country for many, many months now. We want to get the very latest on the situation there in Algeria and neighboring countries. Joining me now from Algiers, is journalist Akram Kariev. Akram, welcome.
Welcome, thank you.
It's good to have you with us. So talk to me about the situation there in Algeria right now. To be fully transparent, there's a lot of focus on sub-Saharan Africa, and sometimes North Africa, we don't peel back to take a good look at what's happening there. So bring us up to speed with what's happening in Algeria in terms of the government's response and how well it's working.
Well, the government applied the containment in Algeria since now. Transportation and also public schools, universities are closed. Since yesterday, they announced that they will remain closed until next October. So the life is very slow here in Algeria. The streets are empty. There's a curfew in almost the whole country from 5 p.m. to 7 a.m. every day. So the streets are very empty, especially during this Ramadan period, which is a booming period for trade and for commerce in general. So it's usually a lively period, the best period for business actually in commerce here in Algeria. But unfortunately, this year it will be a little bit complicated. Yeah. We are starting to see problems, the issues within the population. So a lot of people are complying and are complaining about the fact that they are not able to earn any money since now almost 3 months. It's beginning to be problematic, and we are seeing a shift towards more anger in the street.
we'll get to the social tensions in a second, but in terms of testing and capacity for testing and contact tracing, what's your assessment of where things are in the country and how widely testing is taking place?
It's a little bit hard. There's no public disclosure of the testing number. The estimates are around only a couple of hundreds per day. So we don't know. But in the other hand, there's no lies regarding the deaths and the hospitals are quite transparent and open to the people, so we can feel that there's not a huge rush in the hospitals. The minister was speaking about a 60% occupation rate for hospitals, which is still a good fact and figure. We think that somehow the whole region, Algeria and the other countries of the region, are somehow spared about this this epidemic. So we don't know why, but there's a phenomenon that shows us that we are less infected than what we're supposed to be.
Well, I mean, again, in the absence of mass testing, it is hard to get a full picture of the spread. I think what's unequivocal, what you can't challenge, is the fact that the mortality rate on the continent is significantly lower than it is in other places in the world. I mean, we are still looking at over 10,000 cases in Egypt. Morocco has over 6,000 cases. Tunisia had over 1,000 cases, but they've flattened the curve, as you were just saying earlier. Talk to me, though, about containment efforts in the region as a whole. Does it feel as if the governments are taking this seriously and that as a whole people are complying?
Well, to get back first to the testing, so Algeria is starting to produce a test since yesterday. So they are promising to produce 100,000 tests per week. So we are waiting for the first results regarding this mass testing initiative. Now, regarding the containment, the people are certainly complaining because of the economical impact of the containment. Also because Ramadan is a very lively month, and it's a month that is expected and waited for by the whole population in the area, in the region. So it's very hard socially to keep people at home. It's really, really hard, but they do comply. But I think that now, after more than 2.5 months, it's starting to be tiresome for a lot of people in the region.
And what exactly are you picking up as you talk about, you said in Algeria, there's a growing sense of discomfort. This has been going on for weeks now. Obviously, this is a region that we've seen problems before, with the Arab Spring. It's no stranger to people coming out onto the street. What is your sense of how close we are to that line, and of course, how governments will respond?
We are quite close. But just to get back to the protests of last month, it was like a mid-class protest without any violence or anger or even economical or social claims. So, but today we see that there's more and more people angry about the economical situation and their own situation. So we expect that things might change a little bit during these 2-3 coming months. Maybe more and more people will protest. Now, the last time a demonstration was held here in Algeria was, I think, in March 8th. But since then, no one protested in the streets. But we are seeing more and more people asking for that and calling for that. On the other hand, we have the government, which is taking this opportunity of containment to target the leaders of what is called the Hirak, the social movement and the political movement, and they are starting to target them and put them in jail. So situation politically today is a little bit complicated. We don't understand actually here in Algeria why the government is acting like that, as the protesters were quite peaceful. But we expect that there might be some more troubles within 2, 3 coming months.
And the protests, staying with Algeria, where you are, in the past they've been described as organic, loose forming or loosely formed. I know that certainly one of the leaders has been taken into custody. What's the sense of the level of coordination now that the government has put in place these restrictions on movement? What's your sense? Do you feel that whatever happens will be a spontaneous action, or it is something that is going to be organized and orchestrated?
No, it will be probably a spontaneous action that will come after a peak of anger or any mistake that might be made by the government. We expect that. So far, even within the political opposition, there's no calls for either violence or nor protests in the streets. But we feel that there's an anger somewhere.
And I can't let you go, Akram, without asking you very quickly about your situation, because I actually know that you contracted coronavirus and you were quite ill. Can you talk to us a little bit about that situation and how are you doing now?
Well, I'm doing very good now. Now more than 1 month after I recovered. It was a hard couple of weeks for me. It's quite an experience, and I invite all the skeptics to try it.
Are you still feeling any lasting effects of the illness?
Yeah, there's some hidden effects, and there's still. I still sometimes feel tired, and I have some bruises in my lungs that I feel sometimes. So there's some chest pain remaining, and a lot of fatigue.
Yeah, but we wish you the very best, Akram Karif, with your recovery. We're also going to be paying close attention to what's happening in the region as you talk about the growing unease there in Algeria. We appreciate the update. Please stay safe.
Thank you.
So a sense of what's happening in North Africa, in Algeria to be specific, where, as Akram was just saying, there's a growing sense of unease there in the country as these restrictions go on now for many, many weeks. And he has fears that we will see some kind of action, some kind of protest on the streets. We'll be watching closely for that. We want to take a close look at the numbers there on the continent to get a sense of how widespread coronavirus is right now. So let's bring up some numbers for you. Total number of cases currently, well over 68,000. Let's bring up there you go, 68,189. Again, just for some context, just last week we crossed over. We went past that benchmark number of 50,000. And here we are, it's just Tuesday. 68,189. That is what we're looking at when we talk about deaths recorded, 2,358 to give context, and always to say these are confirmed cases. We're not doing enough testing on the continent, so hard to know the full picture. But 68,189, these numbers coming by way of Johns Hopkins. We're talking about Algeria. They've gone past 6,000. Algeria, of course, just one of a number of countries there in the region that we're focusing on. Morocco, also over 6,000. Tunisia, over 1,000, though according to Akram, they have flattened the curve and have had no new reported cases in 2 days. Libya has 64 confirmed cases on the board, but who can say what the situation really is in Libya given its own unrest there? And Egypt over 10,000 cases there, although you see on the screen 9,746, it has gone past the 10,000 mark. So we are watching all of that. When you look at the number of deaths on the continent, 1,264 of them approximately have occurred in North Africa, so a region that we have to pay closer attention to. As always, we say to you that we want you to send your thoughts. Because the reason we do it digitally as opposed to wanting to do it on television is because we can have a real-time conversation. You can be part of the conversation. You can send your thoughts, your feelings, your likes, your dislikes in real time, and we can share those thoughts with everybody else. So please write in. Your voice is important. Your engagement is what keeps us doing this. So send us your thoughts about the situation on the continent, or if you're in the diaspora. But go one step further. Do one better. Send us a video. Send it to the Home with Isha Sesay Facebook page. It doesn't have to be long. Just about 2 minutes. That's all I'm asking for. About 2 minutes. Just say where you are, what you're going through, your perspective, your opinion. Send it to us. We want to put them on the air and just get a robust conversation going, not just with me and the guests and the academics and the journalists, but with you also. You have to be part of this. So please write in. All right, moving on. We're going to talk now about, we're going to talk about the situation globally and where we stand in terms of cooperation and the shift that we've seen. I couldn't have imagined being alive, being in the world where there would be a global catastrophe that didn't have America leading it. That didn't have America playing a key role in shaping the response. Think back to Ebola in 2014 and what we saw there with President Obama and the actions taken by the American government. Let me give you some context as to what we saw. It was backed by a 10,000 person U.S. response, and the U.S. government was able to construct treatment units, provide 400 tons of PPEs, assist with burial teams, help trace chains of transmission, train healthcare workers, and they worked with international partners to identify travelers who may have contracted Ebola before leaving the region. It was a fully coordinated, collaborative process. We said back then, if there was Ebola anywhere, it was a threat to us everywhere. That was the operating theory. Here we are, 2020, a global pandemic, and it's a very different world we're living in. And we want to talk about this world we're in and just this kind of breakdown in international cooperation. Joining me now is Matthew Kavanagh. He's the Director of Global Health Policy at the O'Neill Institute at Georgetown University. He joins me from Washington. Welcome. Do you hear me, Matthew?
Apologies. Yes.
No, it's okay. It's okay. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. It's a great show. I'm excited to be on it.
Thank you. You've said that what we're facing now, beyond the obvious health crisis and this health pandemic is a political pandemic. Explain what you mean by that.
So as you were saying in the intro, we have in the past seen major catastrophes, and we've seen imperfect but important global cooperation. But unfortunately, what's happening right now is we've got a global pandemic that's occurring in the middle of some of the most tense international negotiations that we've seen, in memory, right? And so as you think about the U.S. and China both trying to vie for power and supremacy right now, plus you've got a U.S. election going on, a lot of the course of this pandemic can be explained by those two factors, right? And so you've got the Trump administration versus the Chinese administration that are both vying to kind of control the narrative, and information isn't flowing the way it can, coordination isn't happening the way it can, kits aren't flowing the way they need it. All of this stuff is really linked to the politics of that's going on both in the United States and around the world.
And the situation, and my next question is, what does that mean for poorer, less resourced countries, this breakdown?
So we are seeing, on the one hand, something that's, completely predictable, right? Where, low-income countries and middle-income countries are ending up with the short end of the stick when it comes to access. But we've come a long way, and so there's no excuse for it in the way in which we might have experienced it, right? So we can think back to what happened in HIV. So when the HIV pandemic broke out, when the drugs and the tests started to flow, they started to flow first to wealthy countries. They flowed to the United States, to Europe, years before they got to the African continent. This is something that supposedly the world learned a lot about. And so what has been created since then, there was also kind of a variety of different pandemics that have broken out. And so we created the international health regulations, a wide variety of different pieces that were meant to address both the lack of cooperation and the threat that comes from a pandemic to folks around the world. But what we're seeing, unfortunately, is a repeat of that right now. And it's a slightly different dynamic, but if you look at the African continent, you're seeing huge problems with getting access to basic testing commodities. And the reason is not because African countries don't have incredible capacity, actually, right? I mean, community health networks that are able to do testing, all of these things that just, could be used from AIDS, TB, malaria, Ebola, all of the experience and capacity and knowledge that exists in many countries is not being able to be mobilized because all of the wealthy countries are snapping up all of the commodities. I was reading a few examples, right? The US is doing it. At one point, Israel apparently has been mobilizing Mossad to get access to test kits. And this is something that makes it very hard within the international community for folks to just compete on the marketplace. And that's a huge problem. It should be coordinated, and it's not.
The thing is, this moment, this global pandemic is building on top of this spread of nationalism and this sense of isolationism and retreating behind borders. And it's contrary, and we all know the science, to the reality that this virus knows no borders. And yet, it's weird how we're in this moment where the scientists are being shut out and the politics is trumping, is trumping the truth we all know.
It's remarkable. I mean, that we wouldn't see U.S. leadership in this moment is really remarkable, right? So, when you talked a little bit about Ebola, one of the things that happened was that the United States government mobilized resources, et cetera, but it also mobilized political leadership. Mm-hmm. And that actually is an asset that's really hard to replace. And so if you think about it internationally, that looks like kind of two things. One, it looks like convening power, right? It looks like, the world focused on the crisis, coming together at a moment. And so, for example, that looked like President Obama going to the UN, going to the meeting, showing up and convening the rest of the world behind him. It also was about aid, right? It was about making sure that countries could get the money that they needed and the resources that they needed and the supplies they needed. But instead, what's happening right now is both in the US, but also, frankly, in Europe and a variety of places, we're seeing an inward-looking focus instead, right? So rather than global cooperation, rather than coordination, instead, folks have really been closing down and really focused on the inside the borders effort, which doesn't work in a pandemic. I mean, not only is it a bad idea, right? But it's a failed strategy.
No, it's a failed strategy. But my concern is the absence of cooperation, the absence of collaboration in the sense of we're all in this together and everybody trying to grab the richer countries, trying to grab what they can. What does this mean for a vaccine? What does it mean for a vaccine and the distribution of vaccine? But also, and this is my pet fear, what does it mean for the development and the testing of a vaccine in this moment where it's kind of an us and them?
It's hugely worrying. And, as you're saying, what's so tragic about it is that it's completely unnecessary, right? We know that that diseases don't respect borders. It's not a thing that exists, right? And we've learned this again and again and again. We've also learned that in a crisis, a free-for-all, everybody grab your own thing does not work. It leaves everybody worse off, right? Because you can't rationally allocate things. You can't figure out how to get people access. And that's where we're headed right now, right? Is a very much, the UN Security Council basically couldn't get agreement and packed up and went home for a while. And so this is really deeply, deeply worrying. And so what's coming in the offing? There is some good news. I think the first good news is, what's actually happening among African countries is really remarkable. If you look anywhere else in the world, you see a lack of cooperation, but on the continent, you actually see remarkable cooperation. And we should applaud the African Union and the Africa Centers for Disease Control. They are coordinating a response that is smart, it's strategic, it's cooperative. It's not perfect, right? But it is the only example in the world that I can find of countries actually collaborating. And frankly, they're doing it very, very well. And so this should be something that the rest of us are learning from, right? And so that is one good news. The other is there has been an effort to kind of launch a new platform, right? So the European Union, in the absence of the United States, in the absence of China, has just gone ahead and they've created something with the Gates Foundation and a few others that is trying to create a new platform for political convening to think about some of these things together. My worry is there's lots and lots of talk within it about how we make sure that there's equitable access. And it's been part of the language, it's been part of it. But how do we actually do that, right? And so some of that is going to be financing, some of that is going to be, distribution, but some of that, frankly, is two thorny, really big issues. One is intellectual property. Who's going to own this, right? We've got a race to see who's going to own the vaccine. Does that mean it's only going to flow to the people who are in the country where the ownership is, or those that can pay the highest bidder? And then the second is this really problematic allocation, right? Where the highest bidder just gets in line. So even if you've got money, if you're not geopolitically powerful, you're not first in line to get supplies. And so my deep worry is that low-income countries and middle-income countries are going to be left behind in that scramble, not because there isn't capacity, but because of just politics that's going to order people last.
And my concern is that in the absence of lower income countries, low middle income countries being able to get a space, on the bus as it is right now, as it's constructed, that we then see the proliferation of homemade cures, and we see these other things pop up because, ultimately there's a sense of, well, we're not in the game, so we have to create our own game. And then what starts to happen? That also becomes a concern.
No, it's hugely concerning. Look, we saw this with HIV, and we continue to see it with HIV, right? Where when people don't have access, all sorts of other things pop up, and we're seeing that already with the coronavirus, and it's deeply worrying. And what's just so tragic is that it's not necessary, right? We have at this point the World Health Organization that, frankly, there's been lots of criticisms of it, but I see it functioning remarkably well. There's a few things that I wish it would do differently than it is, but mostly it's actually really remarkable. We have that. We have the Global Fund to fight AIDS, TB, and malaria that, frankly, has shown that you can distribute funding in ways that are smart and transparent. You've got kind of the international health regulations that have been agreed to by countries about how we act in this period. All of this says we could figure out another way out. We could figure out how to say there's limited supplies. How do we distribute them in a way that's ethical, that's fair, that thinks through things like need, et cetera, where it recognizes that we're not going to say the last American needs to have access to something before the first Sudanese person gets access, right? That's just a crisis in the making, right? Because the other thing we know is that if you have outbreaks in one part of the world, you cannot put up a border and imagine that they're not going to move. So we have to be way smarter. And we could.
So sorry, I just wanted to ask you this because somebody asked me to ask you, and we again the conversation and the dialogue between us and the viewers is critical to the show. How do we change this? Can we change it with Xi Jinping in China and Donald Trump in the White House? Is it possible?
God, I've got the hopeful Matt and the not so hopeful. So. I mean, the hopeful me says as follows, right? I actually think that this the new European initiative is a really good start. It is showing some serious political leadership, and you could imagine a world in which we're no longer in a monopolar world. The United States is not indispensable in the way it has to be. And so what you could see is the world surrounding a new initiative that brings together powerful countries from Latin America, from Africa, from Asia, together with Europe, that actually then represents most of the world. And we could actually overcome some of that. And then you see participation, for example, from states. You see local participation. You see a variety of cooperation that could be plugged into. That's one prospect. But I'll just be honest, I think one of the major problems is that what's happening right now is you've got the Trump administration in charge, and President Trump has decided that he needs to blame someone, right? And so, there was this whole period early on in the pandemic where the World Health Organization was saying, get ready. We don't recommend travel bans because, frankly, they don't work. And instead, we had a narrative from the administration that was, well, we're going to do travel bans because we want to talk about this foreign virus instead of preparing here in the United States. And now I think the real challenge is every political incentive for Trump is to find somebody to blame, because that's what the election, kind of demands. And you're seeing Republicans, unfortunately, line up behind that, but not all, right? And so I guess I have some optimism that Congress will step in, that will figure out how to move some pieces around the administration. But I don't see the administration stepping up and shifting, unfortunately.
Well, you had the good news. I think the bad news won out. Maddie Kavanagh, it's so good to speak to you and get your perspective. I hope you'll come back and see us again and share your thoughts in the weeks ahead.
I'd love to. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Stay safe. Take care.
You as well.
Well, there you have it. We like to give it to you straight on this show. I mean, we all know it. If you're watching us from Africa, if you're watching it from wherever in the world, there's been a breakdown in global cooperation, and that makes it problematic for us to get access to kits and to get the PPEs that we need. And so it's something that we have to pay attention to, and that's why we're having the conversation to see what could be done to change it. I'm going to get your comments in just a moment, but we have another guest for you that has a very important perspective to add into all of this, the role of the diaspora and what Africans in the diaspora could be also doing to help in this moment, and just how we are approaching this pandemic there in Africa. I want to go right now to Dr. Bizogele. He joins us now. He's an assistant professor of epidemiology and psychiatry at Harvard, and he's joining us from Boston. That's what I was trying to figure out. He's joining us from Boston to give us his perspective on where things stand right now. Dr. Gele, welcome.
Thank you, Aisha, for inviting me to be part of this conversation.
It's good to have you with us. I mean, I just want to give you a chance to weigh in on the conversation we were just having, because I know you have a perspective on it in terms of this breakdown in global cooperation, what it means for the continent, and the ways we can counter it.
Yeah, absolutely. As you initially mentioned, when I think of the Ebola outbreak, I think that the rest of the world didn't really pay attention much to the continent when the continent was experiencing more than 28,000 cases. I think it paid attention when it hit New York City, and that was something that brought the whole world in full panic mode. And what happened was, for many of the African leaders, it allowed them to think that Africa's solution could only come from Africa, and they were able to galvanize resources and be able to create the African CDC. I remember at the end of February, I was coming back for a work trip from Addis. Going to Africa, in many places, they already had screening in place. We didn't have anything in the United States. At Boston Logan, there was no screening in place. And they were able to put together trainings for the different regional hubs that they had in the East, West, North, and South. And I think they've done remarkable work in terms of cooperation. Matthew, the previous guest, mentioned this. The degree of cooperation has been really amazing. And oftentimes, I think many of us, including myself, are critical of African leaders. But at this time, their response to the pandemic has been quite swift in putting together, despite the economic impact that the lockdowns would have on people's lives, they were able to put together measures in place, which I think is quite amazing.
You feel that in this moment there's a specific role for the diaspora as well?
Absolutely. I think, the African diaspora, if you just think in terms of numbers, there are many African trained doctors in the US and Europe. There are probably more Nigerian doctors in the US than the whole country. There are more trained physicians elsewhere than in the country. So I think this is probably a moment to bring those forces together and to join not only financially, but also intellectually. There are so many things that could be done in bringing the diaspora into some of those efforts. And I have seen some of those. Last week, there was a meeting put together by the Center for African Studies, bringing the diaspora, bringing members of Congress in the U.S., as well as African researchers and physicians coming all over the continent. The head of CDC was there discussing what are the solutions that would help the continent. So in many ways, I think, the diaspora is stepping up, trying to contribute, but I think there is more, especially in terms of intellectual as well as financial support to health efforts back home.
And in terms of that need to do more, that's going to be felt or certainly required in the months ahead, because as you know, Dr. Belay, we're seeing more and more African countries, and we understand why, start to ease back on those restrictions. They're starting to ease back on the restrictions because of the economic hardships on the ground. Again, the science, we know the science, we know how this virus works. It just wants more bodies to jump into. So when you ease the restrictions, if more people come together, there are more cases. Talk to me about, the other people to be stepping up in this moment. We've talked about the diaspora as we move towards this easing of restrictions. I know you believe that this is a moment also for religious leaders to step up on the continent.
Absolutely. I think, just one of the greatest strengths is that we have in Africa is the population. I think the people listen to leaders, different leaders. And, for the first time in the history of my mom's life, I called her in Easter, and she said this is the first time that she's following the religious services over the phone. Social cohesion, coming together, is something that people cherish. That's their way of life. But they've been able to listen to the religious leaders, to the village leaders, to the youth leaders, to listen to what the Ministry of Health and what the government are saying in terms of protecting themselves. So I think we have to start to work together, bring communities and making sure that the messages are heard. Use of local solutions. I have seen so many innovations over the last few months coming out different places. We oftentimes don't hear them in mainstream media, but it's amazing type of creativity that needs to be supported, that needs to be encouraged. Those solutions and the community coming together is something that is going to help over the coming weeks and months.
One of the things that I remember from covering Ebola in 2014 was this point made that you can't take away things from people without giving them something in return. It's giving them something to replace what you're taking. So you can't say, in the case of Ebola, where there's the restrictions, the health recommendations, which were necessary, you can't wash your dead. You can't wash your dead, which is an important rite, an important ritual in Islam. You can't do that because then that, exposes you and it extends infection. But you have to give communities something else they can do in its place so that they can perform a ritual, so they feel they can honor those who pass on. And it's the same with this situation. You can't just take, you have to give something back. So I'm wondering what you're thinking. I mean, obviously tech is stepping up. People are using these platforms to kind of engage. I wonder what else is standing out for you in terms of these workarounds so that people can bridge the gap.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, just even though this is a global pandemic, I think, no one size fits all solution is not going to really work, particularly in many places in sub-Saharan Africa. So, it requires thoughtful thinking and interpretation of the data, and for health leaders to be able to work with community organizers, with religious leaders, with youth leaders, to be able to make sure that they get resources. People don't have the safety net. You can tell them to stay home, but they would rather die out of hunger. They would rather go out than die out of hunger. They don't have the resources. So in some ways, I think existing platforms that they already have. For example, you have community health workers in almost in every village, in every district. To be able to harness that human resources is going to be critical. You're right. I think cell phones are ubiquitous, but there is also a digital divide. Not everyone is going to be able to use that. So I think coming up with ways to communicate the message, but also ensuring that people have the means to access to resources to support themselves on a day-to-day basis is going to be really critical.
Dr. Bisogale, thank you so much for the great conversation, and it's important to have your perspective in the mix. Thank you. Do join us again. I hope you will come back in the weeks ahead.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks for all that you're doing to shine a bright light on the continent.
Thank you. Thanks for the kind words. Take care. So lots of perspectives there we wanted to share with you in terms of how we move forward on the continent, how we rise to the challenge in this moment. We know that, wealthier Western nations are doing their own thing. What do we do on the continent to fight this pandemic, to fight this virus? And that's why we're having these conversations with bright minds to talk about what the diaspora can do, what community health workers can do, what religious leaders can do. There's a role for everybody in this moment. There's a role for all of us to play in this moment. And so we bring these conversations to you so that it can spark conversations where you are and new ways of thinking about this moment we're in. You have been writing in, and I want to thank you for that. I'm going to go right to the top of the show. We have folks in from Eindhoven, Holland. Pam Keita, thank you for watching. Bev Archibald, who's here from London. Abiodun Christopher Odubella says he loves the show. Thank you for those kind words. Adejo Victor David from Uxbridge, London. We have London in the house. We also have Freetown in the house, Lumley. Sal Poisal is here. Marisa Amina Aziz Sankor, thank you for the kind words. I love you, big sis. Love you back. A lot of love from and also a Hornchurch, Essex. Margaret Cole says it's a great program. Thank you. We love the feedback. We want to hear what's working for you and what isn't. Pat B writing in, watching from Sierra Leone, from Bo. Welcome to the show. We have Gambian House. We are all over. I mean, I cannot tell you how excited I am to see all these messages from people who are all over the place, in Europe, in Africa, Malaysia. Ama Aminu Umar from Terengganu in Malaysia. We have Malaysia in the house as well. Chikere M. Eze says global cooperation, or rather global collaboration and cooperation requires deep thinking with which the current US leadership lacks. I think that's true. I think in the absence of a US administration that wants to engage with the world, again, everyone's entitled to do what they want to do, but as Africans, we need to focus on what we can do collaboratively to rise to this challenge. Ebo Damte says a global pandemic requires a coordinated global solution. Could not agree more. Jocelyn Mahutu Remy is sending some thumbs up. Sisan Adidi says, what can African countries do better at this time? I think that's what we were getting into there with Dr. Blair, the way we can use our diaspora, we can use the local leaders, the local religious leaders, community health workers. These are the ways that we can form an African solution to our own engagement with this global problem. John Gordon, Africans have arguably better understanding of the damage disease can cause than people in the West. We certainly have borne the brunt of outbreaks many times over, so we do have a sense of what this could mean, and certainly economically the damage it could do to our continent. We know that sub-Saharan Africa is facing its first recession in 25 years, so this is real for us. It's real for us in a way that is more acute, in the sense we don't have the social networks, we don't have the social safety nets, rather, to lift up millions and millions of people, the trillions of dollars to give in bailouts and the such. So yeah, you're right, John Gordon. We do have a better understanding of the damage disease can cause. Thank you for writing in. We'll continue to get to your comments throughout the show, but I want to bring you this story now out of Ghana. There are many different ways of mourning loved ones. What immediately comes to mind, scenes of people weeping, the sorrow that we know, that our minds readily go to. But what about dancing? What about the dancing piece? Well, it turns out in Ghana, there is such a thing as sending off your loved ones in style, and it does come with some fancy footwork. Long before this pandemic, the dancing pallbearers were on the radar for many people there in Accra, as they turned up in their flash suits and their shiny shoes, and carried off your loved ones in a way that would bring a smile to your face. They are still dancing in this pandemic, but now they have a new mission and a stark warning. I spoke to the founder of the group, Benjamin Aidu, a little earlier, and take a listen to our conversation. Benjamin Ida joins me now from Accra, Ghana. Benjamin, welcome to the show. I know that this idea for the Nana Otafrija pallbearers came to you while you were still in school. It was an idea to help you basically make ends meet. But where did the whole notion of dancing come from?
Yes, yes, I think it was my opinion, and then I initiated it because anytime you go for programs, people do cry. I don't want to hear someone crying, and sometimes to in a result, someone will fall unconscious, and then they will rush the person to the hospital, and sometimes they are being pronounced dead. So I sat down and analyzed myself. I said, no, I need to have a variety. So what should I do? No, okay. It came to my mind, let me, add a little bit of display. So I added, and then, people start loving it. And it clicked. And then, people are coming more and more, families are coming, rendering services for them and stuff.
I mean, you say it clicked, but did you have any idea it would become the global phenomenon that you have become today? Did you ever foresee that?
I would say no and yes, because it got to around 2017 that a BBC came in and did a video with me. They asked questions and stuff, and then took some shots and left. And then the same year, Al Jazeera came in, so I saw the thing going bigger. I saw the thing going bigger, but not to the extent of this year. This pandemic, did me a great favor, and then the video went viral for people to stay indoors, to scare people. At the same time, people get happy with it and then display with it, and even they have versions. And then I have so many fans now in every country calling and telling me that yes, I'm their number one fan. So I feel great and I'm happy.
So, Benjamin, let's talk a little bit more about what you're doing now in this time of the pandemic, because obviously, as you made clear, you have been doing this and have been successful and well known since 2017, but things have really escalated now with the pandemic. Talk to me about the message you are sharing with the Ghanaian public and the world now, because you're still dancing, but now you're dancing with a very clear message and there's a very clear mission.
Yes, for now, directives have been given from the president, for private ceremonies and stuff. So we don't do the dance for now. But what I always do is, just give some people, do a little bit of a dance and tell people, I warn people about this disease. And I also thank the doctors. And, I've been doing short videos for people to, scare people off the street, because if you don't have anywhere to go, you need to stay at home. You don't have any important thing to do outside. Why should you go out? And you are not an essential person, to even help. So I need to do videos and things for people to scare them off, and then at least educate them about wearing of the nose masks. Yeah. And then you see there's my nose masks. Yes, and then using of the sanitizers, and then washing of hands and then stuff. And then the most important thing is the social distance, because we are joking with this pandemic, this virus, and we shouldn't, because we have a lot of cases now. We have 5,000 cases now in Ghana. So they think it's not real. They think the virus is not there because they've not seen. So, they are joking with it. So I think I'm good to go. Now my video is being used to scare people, to let them know that if they are going to joke, we are going to dance with them.
Benjamin, how are people receiving the message?
Yes, I think people, it's going viral, and then people are serious with it. And then people, I think the whites are using coffins now on street, because they sent me a video that they are using on street, and then the song being played behind to warn them that yes, the virus is there. They shouldn't joke with it. And I think it's a good initiative. And then people too are using the banners. I think Brazil, I saw one in Brazil that they've used our banner and stuff to scare people. So I think it's a good initiative.
Yeah.
And I'm
Well,
very
I mean, it's definitely having an impact. It's been in the Washington Post newspaper here in the United States and everywhere. But I can't let you go without asking about the look, the hat, the jacket, the sunglasses, the shoes. Give me, I mean, you're bringing swagger to the pallbearing business. Just, give me some sense of how you've shaped the flavor and the look of your group.
Yes. Since I'm talented, I know what I'm doing, and I want to get far, and then I want to be branded as Nano Afrija. Anytime you see the group with even this sash on, yeah, this is Nano Afrija. So it got to a time, anytime I see this same suits, same trousers, same shoes, and I'm forced to buy, and then I purchase those things, and then it went viral. People see that, yeah, this is the unique group. Yes, there's quality and not the quantity. And we have competitors in Ghana doing the same job with me. They are competing with me. So I did a brand. I was having my brand that when you see us, you know where we are coming from. Assuming I'm not there and a certain leader, because I'm working with 100 guys now. 95 of them are male, 5 of them are female. So assuming we have a funeral today and I have 6 funerals to attend, that means I have to divide the groups and they will go. So immediately you see their shoes, their suits, and even their hats or spectacles on. Yes, this is Nano Tafrija guys, doing the pallbearing service.
Well, the look and the message have gone viral, and you are doing important work in spreading the message that this is a serious situation that people need to really focus on and do everything to keep themselves safe. So, Benjamin Ida, we thank you for your time and the fact that you are doing this work. Thank you. Stay safe.
Okay, same here. Bye.
I love the glasses. I love the hat. I love the swagger. As you said, he's a brand. He is not wrong. He is a brand. All right. When I get to 5 stories that we're keeping an eye on here on the show, and we want you to do the same in the hours ahead. We're starting with this dire warning coming from the WHO and UNAIDS. They're warning that more than 500,000 people in sub-Saharan Africa could lose their lives between now and next year from AIDS-related illnesses if there's an interruption in their care, in their antiretroviral therapy. And so they're urging governments to get ahead of this situation and really prevent this from happening. Obviously, they're saying that if there was an interruption of about 6 months, it would see the clock set back. And it would take us back to 2008 when there were roughly about 950,000 AIDS-related deaths on the continent. So really grim words coming from WHO and UNAIDS that we could see 500,000 people in sub-Saharan Africa die between now and next year from AIDS-related illnesses if their treatments are interrupted. Also, I want to tell you that there was a tweet just put out by WHO just a short time ago that nearly 1,000 health workers in Africa have been infected with coronavirus. A tweet by WHO, nearly 1,000 health workers infected with coronavirus. The second story that we're watching for you is out of Kenya. When you hear those numbers of 1,000 healthcare workers being infected, you understand why in Kenya they're now saying that all patients before they're admitted into hospital must be tested for coronavirus in an attempt to curb infection of their workers. On the political front, Uhuru Kenyatta just joined a regional bloc meeting of the East African Community Heads of State, and that meeting chaired by President Paul Kagame. We are watching to see what came out of that, and we'll share those details with you in the days ahead. Senegal. Well, the situation in Senegal is the numbers are still going up. On Monday, they posted their highest one-day jump in cases. So now they're reporting 1,886 confirmed coronavirus cases. All that being said, President Macky Sall also saying on Monday, late Monday, that he's going to begin to ease those restrictions there in Senegal. So mosques and churches are reopening. He's taking an hour off the curfew in the morning and in the evening, and weekly markets can reopen. There are concerns because, as we all know, when you open up without the restrictions in place or without the measures in place for testing and contact tracing, you see a surge in cases. But this is what Macky Sall said, the president. In this new phase that will not last a few weeks, but 3 or 4 months, we need to learn to live in the presence of the virus. Story number 4 that we're watching for you out of Nigeria. And we're now hearing that Madagascar's so-called cure continues to make the rounds. This, we're now hearing that Nigeria is going to send a plane to collect its consignment of Madagascar's COVID organics, as I renamed the thing. They're going to pick it up from Guinea-Bissau, which apparently has their share. We're getting this from Boss Mustafa, president of the Presidential Coronavirus Task Force. He says that they're sending a plane, they're going to collect it, but he also added this, that President Buhari has given clear instructions that this tonic must be subjected to the standard validation process for pharmaceuticals. There will be no exceptions for this. Again, I'm going to say it every day on the show, for as long as we're on the air and we're talking about COVID organics. Until the science, until the data is disclosed that this thing is safe and has no side effects, everybody needs to tread very, very carefully. Very carefully. WHO, ECOWAS, Africa CDC, all warning people against homemade cures and against self-medicating. We do not have any data to back up the claim that this thing cures coronavirus. I'll keep repeating it. As long as you tune in, I'll keep saying it. The final story that we're following for you, Malawi, huge election rallies in that country, which started over the weekend. Huge election rallies. We've seen masses of people gathering in defiance of the Malawi Election Committee, or Commission rather, saying, let's find a different way to campaign as we move towards those July elections. That's not happening. We've seen crowds gathered in defiance, no social distancing, no masks in sight. Obviously a concern. This vote is set to happen on July the 2nd. It's a do-over, because you may remember that the re-election of President Peter Mutharika in May 2019 was nullified by the Constitutional Court. And so they are campaigning. They're campaigning hard. Malawi currently has 57 confirmed cases and 3 deaths recorded. The 5 stories we're following for you, and we'll continue to bring you updates on those and everything else coronavirus related as it applies to the continent. All right, before we go, every day on the show, we try to bring you the bright side, take you to a place where you can smile, where we can maybe exhale and reconnect with our joy, because here on Home with Isha Sesay, we believe that that is important. Joining us today is Olympic silver medalist Daryl Homer. Back in 2016, Daryl was the first American to win an Olympic silver medal in the individual saber, in the men's individual saber, the first one in 112 years, and he's my guest on the bright side today. In 2017, Daryl spent time in Senegal, which we were just talking about. He was there teaching fencing to children. There he is with children. Twice a week, he worked with juvenile prisoners and street kids as part of the country's experimental rehabilitation program. And we caught up with him a little earlier. Take a listen.
Hello everyone, Daryl Homer here. I'm quarantining in New York City. I'll be joining the Bright Side later today just to talk about quarantine life and just checking a bit. I've been spending my time primarily connecting with family and friends, also reading a lot, working out to try to stay in shape, to make sure I have a head start when we get back into Olympic Games preparation, and also just kind of contemplating the future and where I see my life, the things I want to do, how I want to add value to the community, and how I want to grow. So I'm excited to speak to you all later. Take care until then, and I'll see you at 4 p.m. Bye-bye.
We're excited to speak to him too. He's going to be with me on Instagram, top of the hour. So basically in about 30 seconds. That does it for us here on Home with Isha Sesay. Whether you're watching us on Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube, thank you. Hope you'll join us again tomorrow, same time, same place. Another great show being worked on for you to bring you the very latest on the pandemic as it affects Africa and Africans wherever they are in the world. Thank you for taking time out to spend with me on this Tuesday. Please stay safe, everyone. See you soon. And join me on Instagram. Grab a drink and join me and Daryl. Be part of the conversation. Bye for now.